Today I'm going to show you how to create these three procedural textures you see here. And these are actually textures that I saw on people's clothing just around town. And I wanted to try and recreate them in Blender. I just kind of thought about how I would do it and came home and tried it out. There's probably a couple different methods you could use to create these patterns, but I'll just show you what I came up with here. Let's start by setting up our screen. I'm going to get rid of the cube and bring in a plane. Change this whole middle area to my shader editor and hit N to get rid of that shelf. Come up here and change this material that was on our default cube. I'll just put it on our plane. In this top right, I'm going to change this to the 3D viewport, scroll across, turn off these overlays, zoom in a bit, and just hold down Z and go into rendered mode there. Let's get rid of this principled BSDF and bring in a Voronoi. This is going to be the basis for our circles. I'm going to bring in a mix RGB, place it right after here, and let's change this to color burn, duplicate that, and change this to color dodge. Color 2 on the color burn is going to be black, and color 2 on the color dodge is going to be white. And if I drag this across the factor on the color dodge, you can see the gradient disappears. And I'm going to change this randomness right here on the Voronoi to 0. And then we can drag this up. We get a range of about 0.5 to about 0.85 where they completely disappear, where we can control the size of those circles. So we want the circles to be larger on the bottom and smaller on the top, and we can do that with this factor slider right here. Let's bring in a texture coordinate node and place it right here. We're just going to run out of generated. Let's bring in a separate XYZ and just place it right after there. And if we run out of the Y, we see the gradient there going from 0 on the bottom to 1 on the top, which is represented in black, to white there. So if we bring in a math node, we can reverse that. This is just one of the ways. Obviously you could do it a couple different ways, but if we multiply this by -1, it's in the opposite direction. So the only problem here is now we have to bring in another math node and basically add something to this to get that gradient correct. So we can see right here it's low on the top and higher right here. And let's see how that looks if we run that into the factor right here and take a look at this color dodge. We can see that effect kind of happening. So now we just have to tweak these values until they look good. And since this is a higher number, it's going to be a sharper gradient. So why don't we ease this off a little bit, bring it down, and bring this back here. We're getting closer already. The numbers I was happy with is this multiply is -0.2, this add is 0.7, and this Voronoi scale down here is 11. So this is what my final texture looked like up here, but yeah, you could tweak these around and make quite a few different variations. Let's get rid of this principled BSDF again and bring in a Voronoi. And this is the first part of the pattern I wanted to create, which is those outlines. So I thought I could use distance to edge. Let's make sure rendered mode is still turned on there. I'm going to bring in a color ramp and just crush that white a little bit, move this white down to 0.145 rather, just like this. So then I wanted to make a bunch of stripes in between each one, so I thought, why don't I use a wave texture, and let's see what that looks like. I'm going to hit Control T and just plug this from object into the mapping node, just like that. And so I could mix these two together, just do a mix RGB. Let's change this to multiply and change this to 1. And now we kind of have something, but all of the lines are going the same way. I could rotate it over here, but they're all going the same way. So I wanted each one to be kind of a random value. So I need something to plug into this Z rotation right here. This was my solution. Actually, I don't need to search for anything. I'm just going to duplicate this Voronoi texture, move it down here. And let's move all of this just over a little bit. Not this one here. Just move all these over a little bit. Just give us a bit more room to work here. And so this Voronoi right here, I'm going to change this back to F1 Euclidean, and we're going to come out of color, and that gives us a random color for each little cell there. And let's go ahead and just bring in a color ramp here. That's just a quick way to convert it to black and white. And then I'm going to bring in a vector math node. We're going to place that right here. And we're going to change this from add to multiply, and change this value down here to something, I don't know, not too high, like 4.7 seemed to work with me there. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug this right into the rotation on this mapping node down here. So there we go. And so if we view this, we can see now each cell has a different value for that 4.7 based on what's coming out of this Voronoi texture right here. So yeah, it's kind of interesting here. I'm also going to just hit Control T on this guy, move this over here, and just plug this into the vector here. And let's move this so it's coming out of object there as well. So these cells are a little bit small compared to what I had. I actually had a value node set up, so it was synchronizing these. I think in any of these cases where you have the two Voronois that need to be synced up, like if this one isn't quite right, they're not overlapping in the right spots. So we need to sync them up. So it's nice to have a value node just plugged into scale and then again into scale here. And the value I used was, what was it, 3.6. And then I did the same thing with a second value node. Just plugged it into randomness and just changed this to 1, just like that. And this is texture 2 here. On to texture 3, let's get rid of this principal BSDF again here. I'm going to bring in a Voronoi. So we want some rectangles. I'm going to bring in this Voronoi and change it to Chebyshev, because that gives us squares. And we can hit Control T, change this from object, and let's just change the scale on the Y there to 5. So that gives us these rectangles a little closer to what we want. I'm going to bring in 2 mix RGB nodes, place them here, change the first one to color burn, second one is going to be color dodge, and change color 2 on the color burn to black, and color 2 on the color dodge to white. These allow us to change the size with this factor and the fall off with this factor here. So I'm going to set this at 0.4 and 1 respectively. Then I wanted to make it so that there were spaces where these rectangles weren't appearing. So I figured I could do it with a wave texture, but I just wanted to do it a different way here, just with first of all, bringing in a separate XYZ. We're going to run object into here and just look at the X, and we can see a gradient starting from the middle going to the right side. I'm going to introduce some math nodes here. First of all, this is going to be a multiply, and then this is going to be a fraction right over here. Then this is going to be a subtract. So let's just see what we're doing here. This multiply right here makes it so that there's a couple of different sections there. The higher I make this, the more sections we have on the right. And this fraction is what allows those sections to appear in the first place. And then this subtract just creates a simple offset, because without this, we just kind of have this gradient that goes from 0 to 1, 0 to 1. So if I move this back and forth, I can do whatever I want. I'm going to change this to 0.5. I'm going to bring in another math node here, and this is going to be an absolute. And this actually makes it so that it's a mirrored section each time. So it goes from now 0 to 1 to 0. Actually, I believe it's 0.5 at this point. And then we can change this one more time with another multiply and just get this a little bit more, little higher. So if we set this at 2, now it's 0 to 1 to 0 to 1. I'm going to bring in a color ramp and place it right after all of this and just tighten this up. Just bring the black up to 0.32, just like that. So that just makes these bands a little bit bigger. So I'm going to bring this section just a little further down here, because we're actually going to mix this color ramp with this Voronoi texture here. Not the way that it's set up right here. We're actually going to plug this color ramp into the factor here, just like that. So now I can see these bands appearing with the rectangles right here and this gray strip right here. We're going to move that, just plug it right into that color burn there. Make sure that's not plugged into the bottom. And let's view what's going on here. There we go. This is actually texture number 3. So we can play around with this one quite a lot, make these bands bigger or smaller with this first number here, change this second number and they encroach or disperse a little bit more. Change this around here as well. Same kind of similar effect happening. Just varying levels of control, just doing slightly different things. We could also change this randomness to 0 and get something, or close to 0 and get something a little bit more interesting. Change anything here. We could also change this Voronoi obviously as well, to whatever we want there. Let's see what this is giving us. Yeah, kind of interesting. That's it for today. If you had any trouble following something, feel free and ask any questions. If you want to create a different texture, feel free and ask me about that too. I might have some insight. Thanks for watching.